Welcome, welcome, folks. We're going to give people a minute as they are coming in. If you want to head into chat and introduce yourself to participants, let people know where you're from, that'd be great. We'll get started in just a minute. This is awesome. We've got people rolling in from all over the country. All right, if you're just joining us, you can head right into chat and introduce yourself to everyone. Let people know where you're from, where you are in the country. That'd be great. And I'm going to go ahead and get started as folks are joining. So welcome everybody. I am thrilled today to be gathering together to share and think together about in-person outdoor instruction during COVID. We'll do a little bit of housekeeping before we dive into the content. You probably just saw this in a pop-up, but we're recording this webinar today so that we can share it in a follow-up email and share it with folks who couldn't be here. Just so you know, your faces are not on the recording, just the panelists are. And we're also going to share a copy of the presentation at our website, the SGSO-Network website, which is right there on the slide. Throughout the presentation today, we're going to be hearing from 6 fantastic, fabulous trailblazers who have already started teaching outdoors with COVID restrictions in place. If you have questions for them that you want to discuss, please put those into the chat. And John and Christine, who are on this call, are going to be flagging that chat and flagging questions that we can save up to talk about at the end during the Q&A. So any question you have about the things they're sharing, feel free to put that in the chat and you can know that there will be time at the end to address those. And last housekeeping bit is that after this webinar, you will be sent a survey and we'd love your feedback on it. So here's our agenda. I'm going to give a brief introduction to the SGSO School Garden Support Organization Network that you all are part of and look at some of the resources that we have. And then we'll take a look at who all is on the call. Right now there's 123 of us and the numbers are growing. So we'll just kind of look at some information that you put in the registration about who all is here. And then we're going to hear strategies from the field about in-person outdoor instruction during COVID. And so that's when we'll hear from our 6 fabulous panelists who have already started this work and have learned some lessons that they can share with us as we dive into it. There will be time for Q&A and then the feedback evaluation. So the SGSO network, many of you, I recognize a lot of names, so I think many of you have been part of this before and many of you may be here for the first time. So a quick overview. We are a network of school garden support organizations, and the goal of this network is to connect all of us SGSOs to inspire one another and share best practices, resources, and ideas, really with the intention that we can better grow the school garden movement nationally if we're all working together and sharing our brightest ideas and problem solving together. So toward that end, the network provides webinars like this one. When it used to be possible, we also had in-person gatherings, and those will resume again once we're able to. And then we have a digital commons at the SGSO network website. You can find all sorts of written resources and a forum, all designed to help SGSOs share ideas with each other about how to best support school gardens. This is just kind of an example of the most recent webinars and virtual gatherings we've had, and we record those. So the ones that, if you've missed any, they're all archived there. And then you can see the ones that we have coming up. So the most recently archived was bringing social emotional learning and mindfulness education to your work. And then coming up after this one, we've got school garden support for food relief and then addressing equity in school garden programs. So those are upcoming. I will note that a couple of the webinars that we've recently recorded are really relevant to today's topic. So garden care and maintenance during COVID. is a great example where we also looked at COVID protocols, but really more around like when you're having garden work days and volunteers coming and how do you maintain the gardens with the new restrictions. And so if you have questions like that that are related to this, they might be in one of those past webinars. And we have a great forum. So this is just a place where people can type in a question on the Google forum, and anyone who's a member of the network and that signed up for the forum can answer, and then kind of we work to kind of keep those organized by thread. So that's a great place to look too on things like, oh, where are the distance teaching learning resources from the SGSO network? And then you click on that and see all sorts of things. We take those ideas from the forum and try to really kind of organize them clearly into these resources. So this is that digital commons. And specifically during COVID, we've created these different kind of summary documents on distance teaching resources, outdoor classrooms to support reopening schools, garden access care and harvest during COVID, etc. So this is kind of a snapshot of who's on the call today. Of the folks who registered, 72% do not yet have experience teaching outdoors, but 27 or close to 28% do have that experience of teaching outdoors with COVID restrictions in place. And then as folks kind of looked to the present and the future, we asked about what kind of teaching is already happening or what do you hope is happening? So looks like close to 25%, or sorry, 25 people are planning on, they're doing in-person schooling and they are using the outdoors already. Another close to 25, a little over 25 people are doing in-person schooling and they're hoping or planning to use outdoor spaces soon. The vast majority, over 100 of the registrants, are in distance teaching now, but are hoping or planning to use outdoor spaces when they return. And then some folks, as to be expected during these crazy times, have no idea yet what is to be expected. And then again, about 25 or 30 are doing distance teaching now, but they know that they will be using outdoor spaces when they return. And then a small little portion don't have much potential yet for outdoor teaching, but are interested in the idea. So I want to show you a few resources that are available to you on the SGSO Network website related to today's theme, and then we're going to hear from our panelists. So I've been working on a working group, and this is actually how I met many of the panelists here. I've been working on a working group connected with the Green Schoolyards America COVID Outdoor Learning Initiative. And this is folks from around the country trying to think about how to open outdoor classrooms as part of a safe reopening solution for schools. And together we focus specifically at my little working group on instructional strategies. And from that, we created four support documents. One is, a few of these are really for teachers who might not yet teach outdoors. They weren't planning on teaching outdoors. They weren't garden educators or environmental educators. They're classroom teachers who are now going, oh, I might need to move outdoors to do reading or to do fractions or to do anything. So for that audience, we created a list of traditional classroom activities that are well suited for the outdoors. And again, this is all at the SGSO Network website. So for example, just helping a teacher think through which of my traditional activities might translate best, be the easiest to move outdoors. And so we have a list of those. Then we have tips for teaching anything outdoors, just things that we as outdoor educators know that might help someone who's new to teaching outdoors about how do I deal with when bees fly around and what do I do about the sun and the shade and that kind of thing, distractions, etc. Then we get into we provided a list of environmental education curricula that's designed to be taught outdoors, and then COVID-specific considerations, which is part of what we'll really focus on today. So now you're not only teaching outdoors, but you're also trying to social distance, you're also trying to use masks, etc. How does that all work together in the outdoor classroom? So when people registered, these are some of the questions you asked. What are the ways to get broad support for this concept of in-person outdoor instruction? How do we get teacher buy-in? What is some suggested infrastructure? Where can we get money and resources for outdoor classrooms? And those are a handful of the questions that you asked. And I wanted to highlight that those questions really have been answered very beautifully and articulately in a variety of webinars that are available on Green Schoolyards America. And so this is a great place. You can see the website right there, greenschoolyards.org. Great place to learn about kind of the rationale behind using an outdoor classroom during COVID. And they also recently had a webinar called Demythologizing COVID-19 with two medical professionals, two doctors, just explaining safety. And I really want to let you know we are not health professionals. So this webinar, there's no one here, me nor any of the panelists, who you should probably ask, do my kids really need to wear masks? Or like, how far is too far to sit? We don't know that. That webinar was wonderful for that, and there are other places to look for that. What we're going to share today is, if you know that you have certain restrictions in place, if you know you're trying to social distance, or you're trying to have masks, and that you're allowed to work outdoors, if your county is allowing this and you're excited to do it, then how can it look? Like, for the teacher, how do we do it? And so that's what we're going to focus on today. But if you have more of those questions about, is this safe? What does the medical profession say, et cetera? This is a great place to look. Also, if you have questions about the infrastructure, like what's the best shade structure, or that kind of thing, Green Schoolyards America has done a great job of highlighting that. So in addition to those kinds of questions, we had a lot of questions that were more kind of like, how does this work? What do I teach, and how do I teach it? And this is really where we're going to focus today. So things like, what do you do about bathrooms? How many students are you comfortable working with at once in the outdoors? What are safety measures around cooking and tasting? How do you do this in the snow? What do you do in poor air quality? Which I put a little sad face, because that's just sad that we're having to ask that, but we are. So these are the kinds of things we're going to be really focusing on today. How does the instruction look outdoors with the new restrictions? So I'm so excited that now we get to hear from some trailblazers. I have been really inspired by all of the 6 women who are on the call today here to share what they have started doing. And their contexts vary. Some are doing farm field trips, some are working in school gardens, some have reopened actual school day schools, some have run summer camps, but all of them are using the outdoors as a learning space with COVID restrictions in place. So they're here to share with you the lessons learned, the things, I'm thinking of this as like the things you found out that you wish you knew at the beginning about teaching outdoors with COVID restrictions in place. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our first panelist, Yalda Modaber, and each panelist, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. So Yalda will go first.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Whitney. This is such a privilege. I'm really thankful for participating in this. And I'm excited I'm learning more about the work that you do. I just learned more about the work that you do. It's really exciting. I'm also part of the national initiative. I've been very active in it since its inception, and I recommend, there's so many resources there, and it's a wonderful group, and there are lots of different working groups. I recommend everybody look into it. There are over 1,000 schools represented from all over the country, and there's a wealth of information available. I'm a founding director of Golestan. I'm going to share my screen now.
Oh, let me stop sharing.
Thank you. Oh, hi, everyone. Okay, I'm going to share my screen now so we can just look at the same thing. So you don't have to look at my mug, as they say. Can you all see this?
Looks good.
Great. Okay. So I'm a founding director of Golestan. It started as a small group of parents basically get together to establish a school for our children. I'm actually an immunologist, so if you do have questions about COVID, I'm happy to answer them to the best of my ability. In a past life, I was an immunologist, and it's funny, I've come full circle. It's come in very, very handy in the last 7 months. So we're a small, very, very small school. We started as a preschool and after school program, summer camp, and then it expanded and evolved. When we first started, we made it our mission to be a resource for other schools. So because our school was just so different, and we wanted to shift the landscape in education, and a lot of our work was focused on helping to convert traditional playgrounds to natural playscapes and pedagogical, to serve as a pedagogical resource. And so now today we're about 120 students. We have pre-K up to 3rd grade. We're adding a grade each year. We started out as a Persian language immersion program, and now it's an international, like a world school. The languages that are mostly represented are Persian, Arabic, and Hebrew. Although in COVID times, we're diluting that a little bit. We have other priorities right now. The languages, we can't bring in as many support as many specialists, language specialists. We have a huge campus that we haven't grown into. So keep in mind that whatever I share with you comes from a place of privilege of having that much space, because we're on 20,000 square feet with almost 2 acres, and we only have 6 classes. So it's very different from other schools. But we're using that privilege to try to support others. And we've felt the impact already, which is really gratifying. We're also in the Ashoka Changemaker School. If anyone's interested in learning more about Ashoka Changemaker Schools, you can please get in touch with me independently. It's a really wonderful network. And that also is a privilege to participate in that. We were granted our waiver to operate in California. For those of you who aren't in California, the governor basically said the schools can't operate unless they have a waiver in hand, and we just got approval for that. I heard that there are some schools in our area that just received them as well, but until the day before yesterday, we were the only school in the coastal East Bay area. So like Berkeley, Oakland, Emeryville, Albany, all these cities right on the other side of the Bay of San Francisco, none of them were allowed to open except for us. But thankfully other schools are opening now. So our organization has 2 arms. One is the school and one is what we call the Colab, and we use the school as a model. I always use the analogy of a sailboat. We're this tiny little tippy sailboat. We're really small and agile and nimble, and we can experiment and try new things, and then we can go back to those big, huge cruise ships and report back what we found and share all the treasures that we found on our little escapades. And then we can help them change course. They change course much more slowly, of course, but it's really fun to go out there and try new things. So if anyone also needs any support, it's one-on-one support. It's all pro bono. The only thing that we ask of people is that if anyone receives support from us, that they pay it forward. So help somebody else, either in the community or through a network like this one, and share resources or like financially support a family or whatever it is that one's able to do to give back. So here's a picture of our preliminary outdoor classroom that we had for our summer camp. So this summer we went back to school on June 22nd for our preschool and summer camps. We had 2 summer camp pods and 3 preschool classes. These were all stable groups of 12 or less. There were about 12. And we set up these model outdoor classrooms. They weren't the way that we intended them to be for our own classes, but we set them up with these tents that we got from rental companies event companies that were struggling, and we brokered a deal with them so that they could provide the same pricing to larger districts that would need them. And so we got the sample in here and brought in Berkeley Unified School District and another unified school district in the area, and we were hosting these meetings to walk through and talk through all the issues around opening, setting up outdoor classrooms, especially at district levels. But the school itself it's grounded in kindness and beauty and nature, and the importance of immersing kids in that type of environment and all the benefits, which could be a whole other talk. And right now the focus is on creating safe spaces and knowing that there's no way to create 100% risk-free environment during COVID time. There's just no way. But there's also flu season, and there's no way to create 100% risk-free setting in flu season as well. There are a lot of myths about COVID, just the webinar that we were just talking about. And the more people learn about them, the more confidence people can have in the ability to reopen, quote, safely as possible. So key factors. We looked at this first and foremost from the perspective of teacher safety. So if we can keep our teachers safe, and safe, again, please, when I say safe, know that it's not 100% safe, but as safe as possible, then by default, our children will be safe and our families will be safe. We're mitigating the risk on so many different layers. So for example, wearing a mask is one layer of safety. Distancing is another layer of safety. Being outdoors and having fresh air is another layer of safety. Not sharing materials. So all of these different the levels of safety that one puts into place creates a setting where teachers will feel more comfortable coming back to work. And first and foremost, we have to make sure that they're comfortable going back to work. Our teachers, thankfully, have felt very protected. And so what we did was we put together a task force, and in the task force, we had teachers represented, parents, board members, and a medical advisor who was one of the speakers of this webinar that was mentioned from the national initiative, as well as we have a whole ad hoc committee of medical professionals to answer questions whenever they come up, and parents from every program. I think I may have already said that. And then this idea of like, let's make all decisions based on real data. There's a lot of data coming out. This is all just new. There are a lot of publications. There's a lot of data that hasn't been substantiated, and lots of headlines that are alarming. And if you break down the data, like I was getting all these articles were being shared with me, and they were presented as being very alarming, but then when you break down the data, it turns out that the data was actually very positive. So like 320 kids in Texas got COVID. But if you count like where 320 out of how many children, out of how many centers, and so then that data was actually very, very positive. It made me feel much more comforted, whereas the headline was very alarming. So a lot of that, there's a lot of time that goes into disseminating that. And if you have somebody in your organization that can volunteer to disseminate that has those skills, or is a scientist and can do that, that's very helpful. I would pay attention to every single detail before reopening. It was so time consuming and it was so painful, but at the end it really paid off. We had such a smooth reopening. I couldn't believe it. And when I say paying attention to details, from writing the protocol, which I'll share the link with you in the chat later. Everyone's welcome to use our protocol however you want. You can just copy and paste it in. If it's useful for you, you're welcome to do that. And in walking through that involves also training. So meeting with the staff and walking through every detail. Okay, when the child comes and when and where does which class go where. I put this map in here. This shows that we've changed our flow so that we have staggered drop-offs, and preschoolers walk in one way, elementary schoolers walk in another way, and walking through that, step by step and paying attention to each one of those details is really instrumental.
Yalda, we just have about 2 more minutes for your section, so
oh, okay.
We'd love to get into the outdoor classroom bit.
I'm so sorry. Okay.
Not at all.
So I'll just share these later, but basically, yeah, let me go into the photos then. Wow, that went by so fast. Can you see my screen?
I see the photos, yes.
Great, okay. So these are our indoor-outdoor classrooms. So we have 4 classrooms that have this configuration. I'm just going to go through this quickly because that's not as relevant. But you can see these are our summer campers that are distancing while they're sitting apart. In the beginning of the summer, we didn't require masks. It wasn't required, but then it's still not required for kids under 12. But what we actually about a month and a half ago, we required kids to wear masks at all times, of all ages. They're all over the age of 2. You can see here, our kids are, some tips here. You can see this bottle of alcohol. Every child has their own bottle, either large one or a small one, for sanitizing their spaces. You're seeing a lot of cooking right now. It's not all we do, but go through. So this is an outdoor classroom space. One of our biggest challenges was creating, can you hear me? Now I have someone right outside of my office. Creating shade was one of our biggest challenges. Great. We have these yurts here. This is summer camp. We changed our settings. Slowly you'll see the evolution. We brought these yurts in. This is a lot of the work that they're doing with their cooking. They were sewing their own masks. That's a really great way to get the kids to buy in on wearing their masks. And the scavenger hunt to go find different teas and taste them and record them, moving their bodies. And then Now we're going to move through into our new year. So these are maker spaces outside. They have their own stations, the kids in the farm. These are our outdoor classrooms now for elementary. So we have 3 elementary school classes going. They're mixed stage classes right now. And this is them in their outdoor classrooms with rugs. Well, rugs, we tried to create a really warm and inviting space. Okay, I'm running out of time. Here's just a quick taste of what that looks like. Okay, and then they're in the garden here. I'm going to give you a sense of what it's now dealing with wildfire. We have all these, this was about 10:30 a.m. on Wednesday morning, I think of last week, where it was really dark. And this is what their outdoor classrooms look like. The air quality was actually quite good. This is on a normal day. This was on that particular day. Air quality was good because all the smoke was trapped above the fog, but it was pitch black. You couldn't see. The kids felt like they were camping. How am I doing? Am I out of time?
You are out of time, but this is so useful, and love seeing that. Thank you so much, and thanks for the resources you shared where we can learn more too.
Thank you.
All right, and so next up, we're going to hear from Kate Jaffe of Kids in Nature. Let me pull up your slides. 1 second. All right, Kate, you're up.
Awesome. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kate, and I'm the director of Santa Cruz Kids in Nature. We're in Santa Cruz, California, and we're actually more of a natural history-based outdoor program, but this summer we did run 5 consecutive weeks of summer camp in a garden-based setting and with 150 kids and had no contractions. And we're in our 2nd week of our school year program. So, next slide.
Thank you.
Kids in Nature. Next slide. So how do we help the students maintain social distance? Next slide. So this is, like everything, a lot of front loading. So even before the kids get there, sending emails to their parents about exactly what our rules and expectations are and some practices so that when they come, they're already familiar with what's going to be asked of them. And then it's the first thing we go over, because before we can even start a morning circle, we have to know how to do that correctly. Next slide. So an important part of that is making sure that whatever our rules are easily digestible. And because we work with elementary school kids, very kinesthetic. So because we're an outdoor program, we chose hawk wings. So to help them remember to keep their distance, we'll say like, okay, spread your hawk wings. And if your wings are all the way out and you can fly without bumping into other hawks, then you're good. And then whenever we notice kids getting too close together, we just encourage them to make a hawk call. And it also helps us learn a different hawk call each day. But this could be any number of different birds or whatever works for you guys. You guys could be like an expanding kale plant. Next slide. So for us, a lot of this is all about logical discipline. Logical discipline and positive discipline are big parts of how we interact with the children. So we're really wanting to explain to them why these rules are in place and come from a place of empowerment and positivity as opposed to fear-based explanation. So instead of saying, if you get too close, you can get each other sick, we say, when we maintain our hawk wings distance apart, we're doing a good job keeping each other healthy and people we don't even know healthy. And this is something easy that we can do and remind each other so that we can do good in our community. Because they're already hearing and experiencing plenty of the energetic fear just in the community and with their families, and they're going to the grocery stores with their families. They're not strangers to the social distancing. I think our biggest challenges were having sibling pairs in the groups and then having families who potted together in the groups who asked for not preferential treatment, but an exception about needing to follow social distance protocols. And so in the summer, we actually did that. We tried that out. And I think it caused too much of a cognitive dissonance for the other kids about seeing, well, why are they allowed to stand next to each other and touch each other's backpacks? And why can they eat lunch together, but I'm far apart from other kids? So going into the school year, I think we're just going to have like a unilateral policy just to make it very simple and easy because of their age group. So next slide. Hand sanitizing. Chose a photo with an especially dirty hand. We were actually making our own inks that day. So her hands were covered in some cave mud we were making ink out of. But next slide. Every student is required to bring their own hand sanitizer bottles to the program. And then we, of course, as teachers, bring our own bottles as well because not every kid has them. And because we have a no one turned away for lack of funds policy, we also have extra materials of everything to provide to any families who don't have them. So this again is part of a huge front loading. Parents get this like very robust and with lots of different colors to make it very easy to follow. List of just how we handle hand sanitizing. So when they arrive, they sanitize their hands, and then anytime they touch their face or go to the bathroom or eat anything, or before we touch any common objects or play any games, we're going to do hand sanitizing. And we really didn't see any resistance to hand sanitizing at all. I think kids are used to this. They come in nice flavors. We make sure the flavors we have are like orange and mint, you know, and just trying to make them like fun and bright flavors. And it's just kind of a nice experience. We haven't seen any resistance to this at all. Next slide. So, how to help kids wear their masks, the operative word being correctly, because everyone did come to camp with a mask on, but next slide. The most common issue you'll see is the mask below the nose. I see this with adults a lot as well, but kids, especially in the beginning of summer camp, I think they were getting used to wearing the mask, but I think the issue really comes more from the parent end and the parents being able to buy masks for their kids that fit, because the kids who had masks that fit actually didn't have a problem having their mask on. And oftentimes I'd have parents at the beginning of the day saying like, you know, really, can you have more time in the day where the kids don't have to wear their masks? I'm really concerned about him. And their kid was fine all day. So we ended up doing some research and finding links to places parents could buy affordable masks that we've found in the field work really well for the kids. And so just giving feedback to the parents at the end of the day as well, just things we notice about masks. Next slide. And then at the beginning of the day or beginning of the week, if it was a summer camp, just doing like making it fun. And again, that like visual and embodied reminder of what works and what doesn't work. So I would kind of be a little bit silly and like put the mask on my head and say, is this me wearing my mask correctly? And they'd all be like, no. And then I would like pull it all the way down or just have it dangling from an ear. Like, is this the correct way to wear my mask? And then so we all made sure we had our masks on correctly, and then talk about really good ways that we can work together as a team to really kindly remind each other because it's going to happen. Not all masks fit perfectly, and sometimes we don't notice our masks slip down. We're all learning right now. So how do we remind each other kindly, oh, I can see your nose, or, oh, remember, we're close together, let's put our masks on. And the kids have actually been doing a great job of reminding each other, and that has like become a non-issue. I was a little bit worried about it being a potential sore spot of kids telling other kids what to do. But because we set it up as like, we're working together as a team, and every time we can remind each other, we're helping everybody, it's been a really positive thing. Next slide.
And we're at 1 minute.
Okay. And then of course, celebrating when our masks are going well. And I think the biggest, just some quick information about masks. All parents are required to wear their masks at drop-off. And then when we eat or drink, we all get 6 or more feet apart before we take our masks off. And then anytime masks come on or off, we sanitize. And the last slide. So helping kids feel comfortable while taking their temperatures. For the summer program, we were doing thermal scan before children could enter the group. And we did this every day, but we found that those machines are very unreliable, as well as the basic fact that most children, if they are carriers, are asymptomatic. So even if they were working very well, it doesn't really tell us who's contagious and who's not. So our policy for our school year has changed, and what we do is all parents have to sign kind of like a contract or a waiver saying that every day before program they'll do an in-mouth thermometer reading of their kid and one adult in the household, and not come to program if it's over 99.9. Because, yeah, yes, okay. And those are just a few things from our program, and I know that other speakers are going to talk more about how to set up the space. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate, for the instructional tips. And now I'm going to turn it to Denise Rowcroft. Denise.
Hi, everyone. My name is Denise Rowcroft, she, her, hers. I'm with the Environmental Center in Central Oregon. Right now, we are experiencing some pretty hazardous air, so no one's outside in the garden this past week. But I guess what I wanted to share was some of our learnings from some programming this summer. Whitney, can you go to the next slide? Mm-hmm. So a little bit of context is we partner with a youth organization every summer in the garden, and they bring over small groups, and we split them into 2 smaller groups and half do a gardening activity and half do a cooking activity, and then they swap so everyone gets to do everything. And usually we have a group of 24 kids. So this year, basically we just followed whatever guidelines they had set in place, which were basically guided by the Oregon summer camp guidelines, which, as other states also experienced, that kind of changed throughout the summer. So they had stable groups of 10 or less, and most days it would be less than 10 kids. And they were in the same group all summer. So in the beginning, they weren't wearing masks, but midsummer, they did wear masks inside and outside. But in this stable group cohort, the 6 feet distance wasn't necessarily an expectation. So you'll see my pictures don't reflect that. So in terms of how we worked with them, at the time when they weren't wearing masks, they had floater staff, which is staff that would kind of give their regular staff breaks, kind of check around. They had face shields or face masks from the beginning. So from the get-go, me and my coworker just always wore masks as well. And I love all the tips that were recently shared about how to get kids to wear them correctly, because that definitely was a challenge that we never really found a great solution for. Another thing about these stable groups is they had their own shared supply. So each group of 10 had like a box of markers that they couldn't share with the other group, but they could share among themselves. So for their supplies, they kind of intermingled their own supplies. But when we provided supplies, we made sure to have 1 per kid that were sanitized when they were done, and not shared after they were used. Okay, next slide. So part of this was really just slowing down and thinking through everything. You know, what are our own personal COVID guidelines for our own organization? What were the COVID guidelines for the partner organization? How did those line up? An advantage to this, I gotta say, was smaller groups. Working with 10 kids is way easier, as you know, than working with, 24 kids. And that was very helpful for, for us. We had not been working with kids since mid-March, like most of you. And it was almost like a way to ease into it, to be like, okay, how is this working? In our first couple of weeks, we actually took that group of 10 and divided them in half like we normally did. Like, okay, 5 of you are going to cook. In this picture here, they were actually making black bean dip. And so there were only, 5 in one group, and then I had 5 in the other. And we realized, actually, it's small enough that we can kind of teach together. So that was one of the change we made midsummer. Okay, the other thing is, in thinking through the materials, just really slowing down and thinking through what is all the stuff that they need individually, what is all the things they're going to be touching, and thinking through this stuff, gathering supplies, setting everything up, cleaning it up, sanitizing, all takes longer than normal. So you definitely have to budget in that extra time. And I feel like things always take longer than normal. And now it's like longer than normal. If you can. Okay, next one, please. So I'm just going to show you pictures and just different elements of what we use this summer. So hand washing is obviously critical. I feel lucky that the year before we got some funding to kind of do an outdoor hand wash station and garden, kitchen kiosk kind of thing. So this is made from, you know, a tub that we got at Restore and attaching it, you know, putting on a faucet, attaching it to the hose and just setting that up before the kids came. So they washed their hands before they did harvesting, before they did cooking. We also had them wash their hands again after they ate and before they washed their dishes, which seemed kind of like overkill, but it just seemed like, let's have them wash their hands before they're putting their hands into this other bin. So we had hand washing available. And then also you can't have too many hand sanitizers. We just found that any kind of station where we would be working, we just had a bottle that way, if you ever felt like, I'm not sure, should we hand sanitize? Boom, you just have it right there. Also, if anyone's, you know, like touching their mask or anything, you just have it available. Next slide. So for the harvesting, you know, normally everything is very group, like, okay, let's harvest all these together in our one big colander. And then we're, you know, gonna cut it up as a group and then share it as a family meal. So thinking through this, we really wanted to make sure that kids had their own colander, and my coworker Tracy, who's on this call, thought through a lot of the stuff and found these colanders at the dollar store. So everyone got a colander, and we have a harvesting sort of station. There's 3 bins. We didn't set them 6 feet apart, like I mentioned earlier, but you can obviously like set those things apart where they rinse their things in the 3 separate bins. So the first one would maybe be really dirty, and by the end they were hopefully clean. So everyone got 1 lemon cucumber, which was the fact that we actually had 10 lemon cucumbers was kind of a big deal. So I was excited about that. Everyone got 1 carrot. Everyone got 1 jalapeno pepper, and like a few lettuce leaves. And this was for our final garden harvest salad. So they're harvesting what they are personally going to eat in their own colander that they're personally using that we're going to sanitize at the end. Okay, next slide. So again, this idea of usually we have a group meal and kids are sharing in the tasks of, okay, you 2 cut the pepper, you 2, you know, do this. Whereas this time we wanted to think it through in terms of you are harvesting, chopping, preparing, mixing, eating your own food. So things from the garden they put in their colander, that was pretty easy. Tracy then thought through, okay, I want to have every kid have access to, like, let's say for our pollinator salad, a 1/4 cup of berries. She had the berries rinsed in a bin ahead of time, was using gloves, and then would scoop out 1/2 cup of blueberries in all the individual bowls once we were all there ready to do our food. So anything that was not provided from the garden would be kind of pre-cut or pre-measured or doled out so that none of the kids were touching that. And the way we set up their station was, okay, everyone's got their cutting board and their crinkle cutter or cheese grater, which we used for carrots or whatever it was. And part of that was like, okay, how many supplies do we have? What do you have at your house? What do I have at my house? Okay, I think we've got 10 if we bring it all together. So there's definitely required some more materials than we usually would have. But because it was 10, it was doable. If we had 20, you know, then there's more materials and more expense. What else do I want to say about this?
I will tell you, Denise, there's 1 more minute.
Okay, next slide. I think it's the last one. So we built this station, this kind of wash station. And when they were done with their food, we would have them wash their hands again and then wash their dishes. They love washing the dishes. It gives them responsibility. It saves time for us. We also, you know, went from like an hippie non-chlorine bleach to getting the full bleach. And we never washed things that had oil or peanut butter because they never do a good enough job anyway. But we also used that bleach bin as you can see on the top right corner, to sanitize other materials like hand lenses and laminated ladybug cards, that kind of thing. So having that bleach bin out was really helpful for giving everything a rinse at the end. Is that my last slide, or did I have one more?
That was it.
Okay, great.
Thanks so much, Denise. All right, and now we're gonna throw it over to Michigan, to May Supros. May, you're up.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you or hear your name, or see your names. My name is May. I am here right now in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I formerly was the co-founder and founding executive director of an organization called Gardeneers in Chicago. And now I'm working for an organization called Partridge Creek Farm, which does very similar work in the Upper Peninsula, right nestled next to Lake Superior. And I'm really excited. You can go to the next slide, Whitney. So I just am going to jump right in so you guys can get tips and tricks, but I really want to quickly just let you know who we are, so you can relate or not relate. We have been working, we did 7 volunteer days this summer in person where we had students show up and do work in the gardens. And then we've been teaching now students in school for 3 weeks. We do 2 programs. One is in the school, and then we do a youth recovery program too. I'm not going to talk about the recovery program. What I'm going to share with you today is all about the 5th graders that we teach. So the school we teach in is 450 students, but right now we chose just to work with the 5th graders, just to kind of limit the grade that we're working with. So we work with, there's around 50 5th graders at the school. Some of them have chosen to work remotely, but our district gave them the option to either come to school or work remotely. So out of the 50 5th graders this year, we have 37 divided between 2 classes. So each class has about 18 students in it that we see. Classes are 52 minutes. We see them 1 time per week. We have lessons connected to NGSS. And I did want to mention that our garden is off campus. It's actually across the street. We have a couple vacant lots that we turned into the school garden there for the school garden. So that's a really important point, because the next slide, if you want to go to the next slide, we wanted to prepare. The first thing I want to talk about quickly and share with you, and I think I've heard this a couple times now, is you need to plan. So figure out what is already working with the school, or things that COVID policies that they've put into place. Utilize those and adapt them for the school garden, because then that culture that is already created within the school day will trickle out to the school garden. So we did a lot of research talking to our school garden champion in 5th grade, Miss Rich, to see what was going on with the school, what was going to be going on with the school day. One thing that they had implemented was the school was already going to be taking temperatures daily. They had required each student to have a bottle of their own hand sanitizer. They have a mask policy. And they already are working in pods within their school day. So each classroom has a small group that they work with, and they do everything with that small group. So that way, if there was an outbreak, they would hopefully be able to kind of pinpoint where, and it would be a smaller impact as opposed to the whole classroom. We also, as a staff, chose to reallocate our time a little bit. So to maintain those small groups in the garden, and I saw somebody asking about staff structures. We generally, in the past, and with gardeneers as well, we always had 2 garden educators in the garden with groups, sometimes up to 25 to 30 students. And we said we have to keep the numbers low so we can maintain small groups. So Partridge Creek Farm, we have reallocated some of our staff time and said what is most important right now, and that is farm to school. So we actually have 5 adults. So we're able to break into groups of 3 or 4 students each during our farm to school lessons. So what that looks like is students come outside, their teacher brings them outside in a very COVID compliant manner, spreading out, and as they walk out, we form a big circle. We do a short whole group lesson in a semicircle with everybody with their masks on. And I'll talk about some techniques about that in just a moment. And then we actually break into smaller groups. So I'll get into that a little bit more, but I just want to keep talking about the kind of pre-work you have to do. We mapped out our garden. So a lot around the garden, we put X's on garden beds, on sidewalks that showed that 6 feet distance so they could just kind of visualize it in their head. And then we actually took some of lessons that we had already in the kind of tool bank of lessons and adapted them, restructured lessons to look differently. So you definitely will have to restructure garden lessons that maybe you've been teaching for years. You'll have to restructure them a little bit to be more COVID compliant. And the last kind of pre-tip that I'll give you is, and it might be too late for this already, but we asked the school if they could add garden gloves to their supply list for their classroom, and they did. So all the kids were able to, if they could, get a cheap pair of small garden gloves for kids. So every kid has their own garden gloves. There's no sharing. So they have their own mask, own garden gloves. We would have loved to have worked out everybody get their own garden tools too, but that was a little bit too expensive. So hopefully we'll get a grant for everybody to have their own garden tool. But the garden gloves was great. Yep, next slide. Am I talking too fast? I have a tendency to do that. So hopefully, if I'm talking too fast. Okay, thank you. So kind of let's jump right into then. We have taught 6 classes during the school day now, which is so awesome. We're so grateful. I have one more pre-tip. And that was, and I know Kate said this, I think that was you, Kate. Communication to parents has been really important. So we sent a letter home saying, this is how we're going to run the garden classroom. This is what expectations, and this is what this is going to look like, so they know. One thing that we also are going to be doing, we haven't figured out how yet because the school said we couldn't do this, is we are going to, if for some reason our school decided if there's even one case of COVID, that the whole school was going to shut down for 2 weeks. So we've gotten ahead of that, and we've decided as a team that we are still going to have farm to school lessons for students who don't show symptoms. So we will continue on Wednesdays at noon, and we will allow students who take their temperature. There's a whole list of things they have to do to comply to be able to do this, but we haven't been able to figure out how we're going to communicate to that parents yet. The teachers, the school did say they wouldn't allow us to send out a letter that said that because they couldn't endorse that. But I did want to just say, if you can creatively continue lessons, even if your school closes, that's a really cool thing to think through that we are providing with our students. Okay, so now let's get into what is working. Communication. We've been communicating with parents, like I mentioned, and with the classroom teacher a lot. Very, very important. What also is working, I mentioned the pods that they have in the small groups. We've extended those into our we call them pea pods, into our garden, so that we have 4 or 5 adult leaders in the classroom, and they work with 3 or 4 students each. It's really, really awesome, but it helps us to do lessons and can maintain those smaller groups. We also have built a classroom culture of empowerment and leadership with our students. So we have buddy systems, we have timers that go off, and the buddies will say, are you wearing your mask correctly? Yes. Are you wearing your mask correctly? Yes. Or if they're not, they'll check in on each other. So it'll be just a timer every 6 to 7 minutes. It'll ring and they know exactly what that means. That is the mask check timer.
1 more minute.
Okay. Oh, wow. That does go fast. One thing we also are doing are to keep space. Similar to Hawk Wings, we do pea tendrils. So everybody puts their pea tendrils out and they make sure that they aren't touching. And then finally, it can be hard when you're in a big group, when we do those beginning of the lesson big groups, when you have your masks on, to hear people. So we repeat a lot, and we also do corn ears. So people will make the signals, youth will make the signal, leaders will make the signal. If they can't hear somebody, instead of saying, I can't hear you, they'll make corn ears and they'll go like this. And that's the signal that the person needs to speak louder. And then material distribution, we have very specific protocols for material distribution that stays with the classroom teacher. And we have one student, one student, one leader who passes out all the materials to the students. Taste testing, that has been really successful too. We do, I think somebody already said this, but sanitize, one person cuts, one person harvests, and then one person passes to all the students. Once every student gets their item to taste test, they take a giant step back. So we're talking 6 to 10 feet apart then. They take their masks off and then they taste test. Next slide, which I think I might be done. So this is my last slide. Challenges we've had that I would love to hear more things about is students with special needs. We are still struggling with how to integrate students with special needs into this because they just, they sometimes have an aid or just need other things. So we've had these very strict protocols and we would like to adapt them a little bit more with students with special needs. Cooking in groups. We haven't really figured out how to cook together yet. We've taste tested, but not cooked. And then indoor lessons, we are fastly approaching here in the Upper Peninsula how to figure that out, so TBD. And then we haven't been able to include students who are already remote, who've decided to go remote. So that's a challenge that we are still trying to think about and be inclusive of. So just a reminder, you can do this, it's going to work. I believe in you all, you can adapt. We are adaptable beings. And so just get out there, believe in yourself, and remember we are resilient and our students are very resilient and they definitely need this. So good luck.
Thanks so much, May. All right, I apologize for rushing, folks. This is incredible information that all of you have to share. Next up is Lee Eck. Lee, you're up.
Hello, everybody. Happy to be here. Thank you for being included. I'm the program director at Me Earth. We're located in Carmel, California, right at the western mouth of Carmel Valley. We've been around for over 20 years. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so our mission is to educate and inspire through environmental stewardship. As I mentioned, we're in Carmel Valley. We're located on the Hilton Bialek habitat, which is a 10-acre protected habitat that is on the school grounds of Carmel Unified School District, adjacent to Carmel Middle School. We have a number of different natural environments, areas on our habitat. If you look at the picture in the right-hand corner here, that's a cool kind of downward-looking snapshot of part of our habitat. That's our organic garden there. In the center, we've got a pizza oven, an outdoor classroom space on the bottom left, our greenhouse and tool sheds in the background. I'll talk a little bit more about some of these spaces. So we were scheduled to do 3 weeks of summer camp. And we actually ended up canceling the second week, just be totally transparent, due to lessons learned and challenges from the first week to reset and do it right, do it better the third week. So I'll get into that in a little bit, but some of the things that we did to prepare for camps over the summer, we did an all staff safety training and a camp orientation just to make sure everybody on our team, whether or not they were directly involved with this programming, that we were all informed and on the same page and able to have the knowledge that we need to be safe and look out for each other and flex in as needed. We had one group of campers. So one stable group. Normally our camps are open to up to 24 registrants. We reduced that down to 10. So not necessarily the most financially sustainable business model, but it was really important for us to figure out how to do this in a way that was safe. And so we just looked at it as building a model. We did color-coded materials, and storage was really central to our approach. We had physically distanced classroom spaces. We had 4 different stump circles across our habitat that we would rotate between. And the ratio, we took up to 10 registrants each week of camp with 2 educators and other staff ready to flex in as needed. And then the other really key component was communications with families before and during camp. So making sure that everybody was perfectly clear on what the expectations were going to be, what the safety procedures were, what the protocols were in case different scenarios could arise. And then obviously like all the forms, the surveys, the liability forms, all of that. Next slide, please. I'm waiting for it to
Are you
catch.
seeing it?
Thank you. Yep, there it is.
Great.
Okay, so as I said, we canceled week 2 because of some of the challenges that we faced and then learned from during week 1. So the physical distancing was really hard. Our camp, the first week was for grades 3 through 5. And then the third week of camp was middle school students. And so something that we're still kind of sitting with and thinking through is it became very clear to us that the middle school students had a much easier time, much less challenging time with the physical distancing and the mask wearing. And so it's hard for us to ascertain how much of that is because they were older versus the way we approached the week of camp with the older kids was just different and a little more improved. So I just wanted to mention that we did see greater challenges with physical distancing and masks and touched surfaces with the younger kids. And that could be in part due to the age. It could also be in part because of classroom management techniques. Hand washing, it was just nonstop reminders with the first week. So we recognized that we needed to approach that differently. And then, yeah, responding to additional external factors, you know, like weather, if just in a matter of an hour, it can raise, you know, 20 degrees in temperature on our habitat if the sun comes out. And so, you know, having a well thought out plan for the day, flow of traffic and where we're going to be learning certain lessons across the habitat, being able to maintain enough flexibility if, you know, we were planning on being in the wide open stump circle, but now the sun is out and it's really intense, being able to pick up and move to a shadier stump circle and be prepared to do that in a safe, a safe way. Also, I think it's important to name the fact that since we didn't have any sort of precedent for this, there really was a lot of anxiety for our staff. People were concerned about our own personal safety, for the safety of the campers. We understood that if anything were to happen in terms of infection, that could potentially be carried back to the household too. So it's worth noting there was quite a bit of anxiety, and we didn't really have anybody at that point to look to and say, well, look, this is how they did it. We were figuring it out. So that was also a challenge for us. What our saving grace was really, and I just want to shout out to Life Lab, we went back to ground zero in that retraining week and really took a hard look at our classroom management practices, our perception, how are we approaching personal relationships, parameters, participation. We really walked through from the first moment of preparation for another week of camp, it's like May was saying, plan. We really needed to think through every single step of every lesson, every experience, and then also other different scenarios as they could come up. So what really rose to the surface for us during that time, clear agreements, procedures, and consequences, physical orientation games in each class space on the very first day of camp. We dedicated the whole first half of the first day of camp just to orienting the campers to the different spaces. We implemented colorful visual markings to indicate safe distancing and traffic patterns. And then also color coding was key. Our supplies, all of the learning stations, the faucets at our hand washing station. But most important, it was thorough planning and clear communication was central. Next slide, please.
And you have 1 minute.
Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. I'm waiting for the slide to change. I have an unstable internet. Okay. So you see some pictures here. I'll leave the text here to be revisited by anybody that's interested, but these are some of the chalk drawings that we did going into our third week of camp. On the bottom left, morning glories, those were places for people to wait for their turn to wash their hands at the hand washing station. The top right picture is a physical distancing game where we walked together and kind of blindly tried to gauge who could get as close to 6 feet, you know, as accurate as possible. And then the fish, there's like little hidden arrow in there, but it was swimming upstream into our kitchen classroom and then downstream out of the space. So just trying to make it fun and engaging and maybe nature themed when possible, as opposed to scary black and red and yellow signs, plastic signs everywhere. Next slide, please. All right, and then a bottom left-hand corner picture there, we had mulch distribution relay race. That was really fun and easy to be physically distanced. We really made a lot of use. We ended up not doing any programming in any indoor spaces, especially the final week of camp. So bottom right-hand corner, the kids are decorating their own compost boxes that they took home. Middle picture there is our stump circle in our garden with some of our educators. And then the top, very kind of rudimentary signage, it's duct tape, but bubble gloves, those reminders, those fun like corn ears, I love that. But bubble gloves is so much more fun to say than wash your hands, wash your hands. It's like, get your bubble gloves on. And then color coding for material distribution. Every camper had their own plastic bin that they were the only ones to touch over the course of the week. And that bin had all of their materials for the week and everything in the tub, including like pencils and markers and magnifying glasses, everything was color coded with that same color tape. So if something got left out, we knew who it belonged to and we could ask them to come and get it and put it away themselves. And then additional materials, if they were needed, would be distributed the day of by our staff. And then those tubs would be emptied and sanitized and left to air dry at the end of the week by staff wearing gloves and masks and everything. Next slide, please.
Sorry about that.
Next slide, and I think I'm almost done. So I just wanted to mention here this, oh yeah, okay. Mapping out staff support. Yeah, the staff support, making sure everybody knows on the team, even if they're not directly involved with the teaching component of camp, how they can support. And so sanitizing, rotations for the bathrooms and the hand washing station, camper check-in and check-out. Parents and guardians, adults are not allowed past the registration tables. So there's different components of communication that are so important. And also just to piggyback on that real quick, any reinforcement that can be done at home when it comes to expectations around physical distancing and wearing masks is so important because they very often can be hearing something different at home. You don't have to wear your mask. You don't have to stay away from your friend that's in our social pod. We even made siblings social distance physical distance from each other during camp, even though they live together. It's important for that to be modeled across the board. I could keep talking. I know I'm probably out of time. I welcome any sort of communication to anybody who might want to reach out for additional chat. So thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. These are such clever little tips. Our final panelist is Anna Dutke. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Anna,
you
you're
are. Hi, thank you for having me. So I'm joining from Minnesota. I'm a co-founder of a group that we have called Miniko, and it's for educators that are interested in nature-based learning. It's focused on early childhood, so there's a lot of preschool teachers, but then also kindergarten through third grade educators as well. And then I am typically teaching in a nature-based preschool program that's part of a public school. Right now, I'm not actively teaching. I had a neck injury this summer with a tree, so I have some time off right now, and I'm working on supporting elementary schools throughout Minnesota and doing nature-based learning. So I'm going to share a little bit about some of the supports that we've created to do that. So on the next slide, there is something called the Miniko Outdoor Learning Toolkit, and this actually started in March of last year when COVID hit. The state of Minnesota shut down, but childcare, family childcare providers were being asked to stay open and continue providing childcare for essential workers. And nature preschool teachers in Minnesota got together, and we started having conversations about how can we use the nature-based preschool model to help family childcare providers feel a little bit more comfortable about having to remain open in this time of uncertainty. And one of those kind of comfort levels is trying to reduce the amount of time of having children in their own home. And so we started creating toolkits and sharing resources specific that we've used in incorporating outdoor learning through all of Minnesota's seasons. Luckily, March, it ended up being pretty mild, going into April and May for Minnesota weather. So we didn't have to worry about that extreme winter temperature, but just starting to think about how you can really utilize your outdoor backyard space with children. And then that, as time has kind of changed, as evolved to support summer camps, and then now elementary schools as schools have started to reopen. So what this toolkit is it's basically everything you might be thinking about of how to do outdoor learning in any kind of site. So in Minnesota, we have schools that have access to a lot of land, and then we have some that don't have access to as much land. So thinking creative ways to support programs through that. So this is a free resource. There's a link down there, and I'll share that out too so that you can access that. And that's something that you can utilize. So on the next slide, what I'm going to be sharing is just some tips and tricks of teaching outdoors for a longer duration. So a lot of programs are used to going outside for short periods of time, maybe 30-minute to an hour lesson. But now teachers are looking to spending the entire, like maybe all morning or even the entire school day outside. And that looks very different, especially with different types of weather throughout the season. So one of the tips that we have as part of that toolkit is how to support families as well as the educators in learning how to dress outside for appropriate weather. So there is, I think, 3 different examples of resources that programs have put together that they share directly with their families on how to dress for the weather outdoors. And then also thinking about the same for the educators and then those paraprofessionals and those support staff that might be working with individual students to make sure that they get the right support too. And then the second thing is, oh, sorry, just really quick, is just thinking about, the number one thing is thinking about student transition. So anytime you're taking students outside, if they're going to be transitioning back inside for whatever reason, whether it's bathroom or getting their support services, if they're in special education, that you have a way to account for those students. We don't want students to be transitioning without being accounted for. So it doesn't mean that they have to be escorted, but that the office is being notified and that somebody is on the other side knowing that that student has now left you and is making their way back inside. So just being really mindful about that, because that's going to vary for each program depending on what their outdoor space. Sometimes you're right by the door and you see the child go in and they're set, but other times it might be a little bit further away. So it might be an escort that you have another student or 2 students go back with 1 student and then the 2 students come back together. So just being really mindful about that is really important. And then you're communicating with the staff too that are looking for students, that they know where you are. So then the next slide is a model that a lot of programs are using, and it's called the base camp model. And what they're simply doing is identifying a space that's going to be their outdoor classroom space, and they're always going to go there to start and to end their outdoor learning time. So they might be utilizing a park at the school that I work at Jeffers Pond Elementary. They have 80 acres of natural space, but their base camp for most of them is right by the school. And it's just a consistent spot. No one else is going to be using it. Or if they are using it, if your class comes out, you get priority for it. And so then that class that was temporarily using it would find another space. But most classes aren't going to be sharing their base camp spaces because they all set up individual base camp areas. And it's just a seating area. So some have chosen to put logs out there for seating. And actually on the next slide, we'll show some other examples of seating that people are using. And that's the sit-upon. So you can create them with using vinyl or tablecloth material. You can, thinking about waterproof mainly is the challenge with them. So just a waterproof surface that children can sit on, or you can purchase them too. So there's quite a few different options for stadium seating, things that you could use to create your sit-upon. So that is one piece, that base camps for most of them are just an outdoor seating space, and then they go off from there to go do their lessons in the other classroom areas. Maybe it's the school garden or the woods or the pond that are nearby. A way to kind of encourage social distancing is for outside. One of the challenges is when the students trying to keep them all together and walk together, they tend to clump together. So what we actually use is stop and wait spots. So at every stop and wait spot, you could see the next spot, and then you can give the students a go ahead to go. And in that picture, you can kind of see it there. It's pink flag tape or orange flag tape in the tree. So sometimes it's distinct landmarks like a sign or a rock. And then other times we actually just tie flag tape to the tree, and so they know that they're looking for that color. And then the students know that they can go ahead of the teacher to that spot and then social distance and hang out there until the teacher gives them the okay. But it just starts, it gets rid of that pressure to move together as a group. And it also gives the students some trust to move ahead and be that responsibility to move ahead and then stop when they need to. So the next slide has one of the big things is thinking about how do you move your indoor classroom stuff outside. So we have wagons that we got from Northern Tool that have actually worked really well over the year. We've had them now for 5 years, 5 to 6 years for some of them, and they've held up well for the rough terrain and lots of different surfaces. So we have wood chips and we have pavement, and then they also are a good reminder for students for distancing. So be a wagon apart, and then as we transition into winter time, be a sled apart from each other too. So these are something that students can help use to move the materials. And then our older students also have bags on their back, so they can bring their backpacks out with them and help carry their individual supplies as well. And then the teacher makes sure that anything that the student shouldn't be getting into stays with the teacher. So if we have our teacher backpack that has the first aid kit, the roster, emergency contact information, and then any medications and things like that. We want that to be really accessible for teachers, so that always stays on the teacher's back. The next slide. The big piece for when you're moving outside too is thinking about that sanitizing. We kind of have a philosophy of if you can't sanitize the materials, think about sanitizing the students. So some programs are figuring out outdoor hand washing stations that are portable, and they're moving those out into their outdoor learning areas. And then in situations where that's not possible, they're bringing the hand sanitizer out with them. So they're using that. And then any materials that are shared, so magnifying glasses and things like that, we do have color coded. We're using that same system or numbers on them. And then things that are limited in supply, we have a check-in process. So you check it out and then you have to bring it back. You can't just give it to a friend. You have to bring it back, we sanitize it, and then it's ready to go back out again. So we do have a process set up for that for any of those shared materials, but we really try to have that individual material as much as possible. So bringing out your pencil boxes and things like that for individual students.
All right. Anna, everyone, thank you so much. This is just an incredible powerhouse of fast-talking, creative, innovative trailblazers. I can't get over it. And it is totally on me that we do not actually have time for Q&A because I just put too many speakers in, and I'm so sorry, everyone. But here's what we're going to do about it. All of the questions that went into chat, we have put into something called a Padlet. It's an organized little note-taking guide. I'll work with the panelists and myself to get some answers in there, and then that will be posted on the SGSO Network website. And so when you get the follow-up email with the archive of this webinar, you'll also see a link to the Padlet. Any question you put in chat, you should see some answers in there. So we're going to do that in writing after the webinar. For now, we're going to sign off to respect everyone's time. I'll echo what May said in the middle of the presentation. We can do this, and I am so inspired by all of you who have already begun, and thank you for sharing your wisdom so that we can start trying it out and paying it forward. So thank you, thank you, thank you, everybody, and keep your eyes peeled for the Padlet where you will see answers to the questions you posed in chat. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. See you on the call.